Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Flash Forum from the Gordon Institute of Business Science here in Johannesburg. I'm Dr. Jonathan Marks. I'm a faculty member here at GIBS in the field of innovation and entrepreneurship. We have a wonderful forum today with an illustrious panel to join me. Today's focus is on connecting around adopting technologies and platforms for business success. I have joining me on the panel today Lessem, who is managing partner of HAVAIC venture capitalists here in Cape Town, Seline, who is the general manager of hearX, Geoffrey Mulei, who joins us from Kenya and is the founder and CEO of Tanda, and Sheraan Amod, who joins us from Cape Town, who is the founder and CEO of RecoMed. So welcome to all of the panelists today. It's lovely to have you with us. I'd like to start just with Ian. If you could introduce yourself, tell us just very briefly about you and HAVAIC, and then we'll move on to Seline, Sheraan, and Geoffrey. So Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thank you very much for hosting us today. A little bit about HAVAIC. At HAVAIC, we invest in local, early-stage, high-growth technology-enabled businesses that have the potential to scale internationally. The businesses range from health tech to safe tech to fintech, digital business solutions, prop tech, and everything in between. You'll notice that I use the word tech repeatedly here. Well, that's simply because that's what HAVAIC is all about, investing in technology-enabled African businesses that solve real-world problems with both local and international potential.
Thanks, Ian. Seline?
Hi everyone, my name is Seline. I'm the general manager at hearX, and hearX is a company that focuses on disrupting the audiological space. So we're a med tech firm based in South Africa, currently operating in 39 countries across the world, touched the lives of more than 1 million people to date. And we really thrive on creating new technologies with world-class, first in its class kind of solutions. So we are in an industry that has been traditionally quite archaic. There haven't been very many disruptions or changes in it in the last 60 years. And what we are trying to do is to kind of come in, change the status quo, and take the industry and kind of turn it on its head. So I really look forward to sharing a little bit of our dreams, passions, and solutions with you guys today. Thanks for having me.
Great, thanks, Seline. Geoffrey, over to you.
Hey guys, my name is Geoffrey Mulei. I'm the founder and CEO of a company based in Kenya called Tanda. And what we do at Tanda is we turn your everyday neighborhood shop into agents for financial services. A simpler way to put it is we turn shops into banks, what you guys call spaza shops. And why are we doing this? So in Kenya, there's a huge, and actually across Africa, there's a huge distribution problem for financial services. There's a lot of innovation across the industry, but there's one missing last mile access for these financial services. So you find there's people in remote parts from across the country who cannot buy an insurance policy or deposit or withdraw from their bank account. So what we do is we've aggregated various financial services, and then we partner with your everyday neighborhood shops to deliver them to the final customers.
Wonderful, thank you, Geoffrey. It's lovely to have you join us from Kenya. And then finally, Sheraan, tell us a bit about yourself and RecoMed.
Good afternoon. So my name's Sheraan. I'm the founder and CEO of RecoMed. RecoMed is an online healthcare booking platform and marketplace, and the largest and fastest growing platform of its kind in South Africa. Think of us like booking.com, but for doctors. It allows consumers to easily search for, find, read recommendations of, and book a doctor or a clinic near where they live or where they work. We have over 1 million users in South Africa. We do over 50,000 bookings a month for over 2,200 clinics and medical practices. And we're also quite a B2B focused business, powering the booking systems for Discovery, Clicks, Netcare, and other enterprises.
Thanks, Sheraan. Welcome. And I think what's interesting is what brings these three entrepreneurs together really is Ian and HAVAIC, because these are companies that you have invested in. Ian, is that correct?
Yeah. So we have to be careful what we say. You never know who's listening, but obviously these are great examples of shining lights within our portfolio. What the common link, other than us, of course, we're just a small part of their story. It's very much around the fact that all three of these businesses are driven by technology, and I think now more than ever we are witnessing. I mean, you don't want to kind of use let's say dated slogans or quotes where you say, well, you know, technology adoption very much has been accelerated by the current crisis, be it the human, the social, the economic crisis we're witnessing now. And all three of these companies are, and again, I don't want to put them under the spot, but in our opinion are very well placed to actually thrive as a result of this acceleration in technology adoption.
Thanks. And tell us a bit about your investment philosophy or investment thesis at HAVAIC that has driven the investment in these three companies and others.
Yeah, so importantly, there's three things that we focus on. So outside of the thesis, we are an early stage investor. So what that means is in the world of investing, you have what one would call seed or angel, which is really friends and family and maybe one or two wealthy individuals who let's say front the capital for your business. And then fast forward a bit, in America, where their term they use is Series A. In South Africa, it's not quite the same, but you may call it early stage private equity. So you've got, you know, early stage investing, seed, and angel funding, Series A, and very little in between. And we like to say we're in between, where they are post-revenue businesses, but post-revenue for us could be one customer. So we really are happy to back the right management team with the right product and take on additional risk, provided the reward is enough. But coming back to, or the reward is sufficient, coming back to our thesis, it's really threefold. So the businesses need to be technology enabled, and that's really important because that then feeds the next theme around scalability. So to scale internationally, you know, if you have a large manufacturing business, of course you can scale internationally, but to move or hire thousands of workers and build warehouses, etc., is not so easy, versus a tech-enabled cloud-based business that you can run from anywhere in the world, such as the companies will chat about that today. And then the third part of that thesis is around the businesses are what we call real-world businesses providing real-world solutions. So what I mean by that is, and I don't wish to take anything away from it, but Twitter or Facebook are quite nice examples where at a core, you know, they have ancillary services, but at a core, they don't really provide a function. So they're nice to have. You know, if you're on Twitter, you're not going to save a dying COVID-19 patient, for example, or you may if you get them services. So maybe it's not the greatest example. The real world is, you know, if you take, for example, Jeff from Kenya, they're providing access to financial services, which are absolute necessities, stuff that we take for granted, to communities that simply don't have that access. So that's a real world solution. hearX would be another example, providing universal access for the treatment and the prevention of hearing issues. You know, if you are somewhere where you don't have access to an audiologist, which is many places in the world, they can help bridge that gap, and it's really a real world solution. So sort of to close off on that, why that's really important is that these are not nice to haves. These are solutions that people in South Africa and other parts of Africa and largely in other parts of the world actually need.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian. Sheraan, I'd like to start with you, partly because I think we're both in Cape Town, so I thought I'd start with a fellow Cape Townian. What are some of the opportunities that you're seeing right now in the med tech space? I mean, you've got an established business, you've got great traction and lots of clients. What are some of the great and new opportunities that you are seeing around tech businesses in this space?
Well, first of all, I think what's interesting about entering what we'd call somewhat of a legacy space like healthcare, it's got large entities that are dominant, it's complex, there's regulation, and most importantly, and I say this proudly, I'm a computer engineer and my parents are doctors. It's run by doctors, and that's not always a good thing for business. So there's a sluggishness to change. Doctors generally pursue clinical excellence, not really innovation excellence in technology. What does this mean? It means that the sector is absolutely ripe for technological improvement, enablement, and disruption, all three of those things. I've seen, we started the company in late 2013, early 2014, and we've seen unbelievable traction in the last 3 years, in the last 2 to 3 years, and things have changed very quickly. So there's a broad sense of how do we use more technology in our business to help to enable things? And that's an unstoppable trend. And I think that trend is driven by unstoppable consumer behavior. Everybody's got a smartphone. Everybody's looking to interact over WhatsApp and get instant gratification for things and be able to do the things they want to do from their phones. And that demand and that need to access my own data and so on has forced innovation upwardly among providers, administrators, etc. So things are changing very quickly. Beyond that, if we look at COVID, it presented some fascinating changes to the sector. As of February, South Africa had dragged its heels in telemedicine for the last 10 years. Essentially, it was illegal. It was illegal to get a prescription from over the phone from a doctor who wasn't your doctor, or from a virtual doctor over a call, regardless of whether that practitioner was practicing. And this had physically held up innovation in the space, and we were one of the laggards globally. Come along the COVID pandemic, which is very disruptive to everything that we know, particularly to doctors. And as consumers were staying home, within a month and a half, I think it was less than 6 weeks, probably within 3 to 4 weeks, regulation was passed making telemedicine perfectly acceptable to South Africa. So we saw a 10-year, this is a bad quote to use, but it was Lenin who said there's decades when nothing happens and there's weeks when decades happen. And that was definitely the case in healthcare in March 2020. So one of the big innovations we've done is we've introduced a telemedicine product, which is a virtual video call product integrated into our platform, which has already seen great adoption. And that's because the industry has to be there right now. So we get these external forcing functions. And this is a global trend, not just in South Africa, but the whole world is moving towards it. So I would say, in general, we're seeing enablement across the board. Specifically during the COVID pandemic, we're seeing a mass adoption of telemedicine.
Yeah, thanks, Sheraan, and thanks. I love that quote from Lenin. I think it's so apt for how there's been so much adoption of technology during this time. Seline, in your business, which is quite export focused, what are you seeing with respect to opportunities right now with hearX?
So I think that, I can hear the privilege coming out of my mouth when I say it. And I think it's looking around at my family and my friends and the tough time everyone is having sustaining revenue generation during this time. COVID has been really, really good for hearX. So 95% of our revenue has always been generated outside of South Africa. Unfortunately, we have a very small market in South Africa. So while we have a really big market share and there's been great adoption of our technologies here, we realized from the beginning that there would be a ceiling that we would hit and we wouldn't be able to go past that. So most of our revenue being generated overseas and mostly in the United States as well has been good for us during this time. April was probably our worst month in the history of hearX with regards to revenue generation, and May was our absolute best. We actually had 1,000% increase on revenue generation in that month. And I think that it plays off a lot of what Sheraan is saying. So COVID has kind of forced people into a space where they had to learn to adopt technology. So Nick's our CEO, we always joke a little bit about how hearX has been a bit too far ahead of its time. So there's been a big process we've had to go through to really educate our clients and explain to them why doing something better, cheaper, faster is better for business. And what COVID has done is sent all those people running back to us for, we understand now, we need it now. And it's really just seen a growth of hearX. And that being said, a lot of our technology, so we have a suite of products, and I'm speaking now more towards the clinical side of things. And in that clinical space, the only way audiologists have been able to continue operating during this time has been with our technologies, because it allows for no touch or low touch remote models of care. and it allows them to then support those person or customers remotely. So it's been rough because we've been working 24/7, but it's been good. And in the midst of all of that, we actually launched a new product that built off the modularity and components of our other products and pulled them together into a consumer-facing solution that then enabled remote and telehealthcare. Unfortunately, unlike Sheraan, we're still stuck in a South African context where telemedicine is allowed, but teleaudiology is not. So we're still going to have to go fight for our right to support our clients locally. But in terms of our international business, it's really been good.
Thanks, Seline. So yeah, I think what we're seeing is new technology coming to accommodate what's happening with COVID-19, but also we're probably seeing a return to more localized services as people can travel less and are looking in their immediate environment. And Geoffrey, just to cross over to you, I mean, your business model is very much built around this high localization of financial services. Tell us a bit about what you're experiencing right now and how your technology and platform is helping. Geoffrey, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, so the primary reason why we started our business was to address the fact that a lot of our markets are cash-based. So our value proposition was come into the market and then provide a bridge between cash and digital financial services. But then when COVID hit, it meant that there was going to be an increased risk of handling cash. So that was a huge red flag. But then we made a shift to one, enable our agents to accept digital payments, right from M-Pesa, soon MasterCard, and then in future Visa, and a plethora of payment methods. But then two, how do we help agents beyond accepting cash for Tanda products? How do we help them accept cash for the other products? So it means we now had to get into the payments business. So we built a payments infrastructure in under 1 month. We got it licensed, we got it approved, and yeah. So in April we also had a bit of a dip because cash payments were becoming risky. But then as soon as we introduced cash payments at the end of April, we experienced a reversal in the drop in the sales. One other very interesting opportunity that COVID-19 presented is, you see, most of our agents are self-employed. It means they don't have deductions into health insurance. So it meant that should COVID hit either our shopkeepers or their family members, it was going to create a bit of a problem for them. So we also launched a new product, health insurance, to our agents, and then very soon to customers of our agents. And so we experienced a very interesting dynamic with insurance, where one, it provides more trust with the agent in that you're helping to de-risk them from the COVID hit. And then, so anyway, bottom line, it increased stickiness, it improved retention, because if the agent is earning more through you and they're also getting an insurance policy through you, it increases our retention. And then finally, because people are restricted from accessing town centers, so it means people can no longer visit the town center to withdraw from an ATM. So it created an increased demand for cash in and cash out through our agents in residential areas, which is in close proximity to where people live. Yeah, so overall, these three opportunities have been presented by COVID, an opportunity to get into spaces we were not in before. And that has it's created a huge boost in revenue, a huge boost in retention. So excited to see what the next few months hold for us.
So thanks, Geoffrey. All of the businesses that are presented here today, or represented today, really you've developed platform businesses, which allows you to expand way beyond your own geography. And we see that very much with hearX, with 95% of your revenue outside of South Africa. Geoffrey, I know that the name of your business, Tanda, as we saw from the screen just before, in fact means grow or spread. What are your plans for growth in East Africa, where you're currently based?
In terms of the growth strategy, we have what we call a 1-2-3 strategy, which to expand it is over the next 3 years. So we want to be industry leaders in one vertical in at least 2 countries in the next 3 years. So that's the 1-2-3 growth strategy. And just to dive deeper into what does this mean? So we like to look at our growth plan in 2 ways: horizontal growth and vertical growth. So in terms of our horizontal growth, so our primary goal is in the next 3 years, build a network of 100,000 agents. So we want to make sure that every household is within a 5-kilometer radius of a Tanda agent in Kenya. So this we can easily achieve with a network of 100,000 agents. And then in terms of vertical growth, how do we maximize the value of each agent? And so the primary ambition here is one, we want to be in a position in the next 3 years to have our agents acquiring for all the popular banks, all the major banks, all the major telcos, all the major mobile money operators, and then doing different things for them, right from account registration to purchasing services and cash in and cash out. And then also beyond growing this one vertical, which is our main business, we'd also like to expand and establish more verticals. So to be more specific, one, we payments, which we recently got into. 2, insurance, we'd like to establish that further. And then finally, financing our agents. So we have a financing product that we're launching at the end of this month, where agents can get working capital loans to grow their business. So I believe this summarizes some of our growth visions there.
Thanks, and I think you've also touched on some elements of Tanda's business model. And I'd like to ask you, Sheraan, to maybe, without divulging too much, just to share a bit about your business model. So for instance, do consumers pay the same rate when they're booking through your platform as if they were doing it directly with, for instance, a doctor's surgery? Sort of what's your revenue model?
Our revenue model is to charge a transactional per booking fee for every booking made via our platform. We charge that to the healthcare provider. Simply put, start a secret, we charge them around about 2 to 3 rand for an existing patient that uses our platform to book. Remember, if we're sending about 6 SMSs for pendings, confirms, reminder, cancellation, expired, there's a lot of states a booking can go through. So there's a hard cost of maybe R1 on that booking for us. The rest would be profit. And we'll charge between 15 and 50 Rand for a new patient booking, depending on the type of practitioner and the type of specialty, be that a clinic blood pressure or flu shot is a relatively low value consult. A high value consult would be something like a neurologist or a dermatologist, pediatrician, gynecologist. Those are in very, very high demand, more expensive, and GPs in the middle. So the way that we create value for the customer, and this is a business model that receives, it took us a while to get to. We initially started on fixed subscription and we moved over to transactional. And there are a few reasons for it. One is that it's risk-free for the provider. They only pay for usage. So we take the risk, we back ourselves that consumers want to save time. They don't want to waste time on the phone, and they've got this need to find better access to care in their regions. That's the bet we make. Then we tell the provider, the doctor, the GP, if people use it, and if we introduce new patients to your business because we integrated with Discovery or Media24, or people find us through RecoMed.co.za, if we bring you new patients, what's that worth to your practice? So we find that the average patient will revisit the same practice 3 to 4 times in a year and will be with that practice for 3 to 5 years. So if you think of over the consult value of that patient over the customer lifetime, it's worth many thousands of rands, and we're charging 15 to 15 rand for that. And of course, if it's their existing patient, it's a lower fee. So on the one hand, there's an IT fee, which is quite cheap. On the other hand, there's a marketing customer acquisition fee, which is a lot more. And over time, what we hope to do is charge around 5% of the consult. That's a very popular revenue model for all platforms. So if we look at Booking.com, Airbnb, what do platforms do? They basically promise an efficient path to customers for a particular service provider. So it promises increased consumers, increased customers, and increased flow into the practice. And they clip a fee for that. That's what we do. So no, the fee for the consumer would be exactly the same. It's free, and they pay what they normally pay. But the provider, this will come out of their budget or the scheme's budget from that healthcare value chain. And Jonathan, there's about 5 different companies, at least, that get paid out of your 800 rand or 600 rand consult. You've got your medicine, your switching fee, your IT expenses. You'd be amazed at how many mosquitoes are sitting along that vein getting their share. It's quite an ecosystem.
Yeah. Thanks, Sheraan. Seline, back to you. I'm interested also just to hear a bit about, or forgive the pun, hear a bit about hearX's business model. And particularly, like, you're also supporting the medical fraternity. I mean, I know that your business is very much based on science, and we'll hear a bit about that in a moment. But you're supporting audiologists, particularly in the US. Share a bit about your business model.
Oh, absolutely. So I think in order to understand our business model, you really need to understand the context in which we operate. And let me just give you like a quick little rundown of what's currently happening in audiology. So the hearing aid industry itself, just in the US, is a $20 billion industry. Okay. And within that space, the US is actually the most penetrated market with regards to hearing aid usage in the world. And even though it is the most penetrated, only 1 out of 5 people who need a hearing aid actually have one. There are multiple reasons for it. The first one being the fact that it is just so exorbitantly expensive. So a typical hearing aid pair will cost you about $5,000, which is an incredible amount of money to pay for a device that helps you function within your usual world. And then the second reason for it is because the access to care is so limited. So in the US, there's a single audiologist every 25,000 people. In sub-Saharan Africa, there's one audiologist every 1 million people. So there is just absolutely no way at the current capacity that the system holds and with the technology that currently exists that people who need a device or a hearing aid or an intervention for an ear infection can actually get that kind of a service. So the current technology that exists, if you take hearing aids out of it, the kinds of products that detect and diagnose hearing loss cost about 350 to 450,000 rand a pop and can only be operated by an audiologist or an ENT or some form of an ear doctor. What hearX has done is developed a product using off-the-shelf hardware and then really hooking a software component onto that in like a SaaS model, again, a platform play linked to an electronic health record system, similar, like we would plug into the user point of view that Sheraan actually manages the practice with. We sit with the EHR data. And we've created that at 1/10 of the price of traditional equipment, and it automates the testing protocol, it automates the responses, the categorization of the results, and the programming of the hearing aid, so you don't need a professional to actually administer the test or provide the intervention for it. So that is kind of what it is that we're doing. And for the first 4 years of hearX's life, we're 5 years old now, and for the first 4 years, we specialized in the audiologist side. Please keep this confidential. I can't believe I'm saying this on something that's going to be released on YouTube, but here goes. Brave. We've been doing this traditional business to try and help the audiologist for 4 years. And we started having internal meetings wrestling with the fact that we were detecting people with hearing loss. We were able to send them to audiologists in the network. And then those audiologists were super limited with what they can actually sell them. So we started having like a crisis internally with regards to why are we finding these people and sending them somewhere where they can't get help? They can't get an appointment or they can't afford the intervention. So then we decided that we would take on the OTC hearing aid market in the US, direct to consumer, and then over the counter once the legislation is promulgated at the end of this year. And what we are doing is we've created a customer-centric or patient-centric approach to hearing care provision with a pair of hearing aids. Instead of selling them for $5,000 a pop, we're selling them at $799, which is an $800 reduction. And not only that, we're tying up a whole bunch of remote care models to that service, all included in the purchase price, to make sure that somebody not only gets a device that suits their hearing loss profile, but that it's customized for them, and that their hand is held through the process of actually getting used to wearing that device. And that is something that has been super important to us. And we're actually launching it in 3 weeks' time in the US. So please send good vibes to hearX. Let's see if a South African company can go change the markets.
Sure, thanks, Seline. That's really exciting. This disruption to the business model of the industry itself. And Ian, I'd like to bounce back to you. You brought two of your investee companies who are both involved in the healthcare space. Is this a sort of active area for innovation and entrepreneurship in South Africa and Africa, health tech?
So health tech is certainly a big focus of ours. So we have 5 health tech investments, of course. RecoMed and hearX are examples of them. So going back to where that comes from. So health is a service. It's an essential service. It's the most essential service, certainly now more than ever before. So there's a need for it. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your demographic, your LSM, whatever. You need access to health care of some sort. Obviously, and health tech means a lot of things, but both RecoMed and hearX, as an example, allow for affordable access to this care that one may not have gotten otherwise. And the kind of leading into that, and you'll say, I suppose not leading into that. To answer your question, you say, well, why South Africa? Why Africa? But let's just focus on why South Africa. So, I mean, how many people have, we all know Christian Barnard, for example. How many people have really thought about the fact, well, how come South Africa, and I don't want to undersell ourselves, but we still at the tip of Africa. We certainly aren't the biggest, population. We don't have necessarily the most advanced medical technologies in the world, or certainly not at the time. How come the first successful human heart transplant took place in, the little town of the Dorpie of Cape Town, all the way back then? And yes, of course, we have world leading doctors. We know this. We know that, particularly in the trauma space, trauma surgeons come from all over the world to go and do their internship in the public healthcare sector here. Simply because if you can survive the public healthcare world of South Africa, you can pretty much, you can thrive in Bora Bora, for instance, where not too much happens. So we've got leading doctors. From a regulatory point of view, and Sheraan mentioned it, we are highly regulated. And I've got to be careful what I say here. So I'll say without prejudice, just in case my attorney might be listening, we aren't necessarily the most, let's say, enforced healthcare state in the world. And what I mean by that is, while we have regulation, often if it's for the greater good, our regulator is quite commercial. So Sheraan gave an example. Telemedicine was held up for 10 years, and all of a sudden, there's an absolute need for it. We need to be commercial, and we need to move forward on this. So if you go and you look back to the Christian Barnard example, highly regulated. You cannot just go take someone's heart out of their chest and operate on it. But you do have cadavers. In America at the time, you had to jump through hoops to be able to actually go and play with a dead person's heart. I mean, sorry if it's a bit gory. In South Africa, you had to have the approval, but the hospital sort of let you get by. So what that meant was, and don't please, my numbers won't be exactly right, but it allowed for almost 100 times the amount of heart, let's say, testing in South Africa, because you have to go through much paper per person as opposed to in America. So ultimately, that light, let's say, regulation, light enforcement allowed for this innovation. So it's not necessarily technology innovation, but it's innovation. A heart transplant at the time was incredibly innovative. So what that means is that we are actually able to do a lot of things here with our skills and our knowledge, which are internationally comparable. The standards are internationally competitive, which you may not be able to do in America. So I'll sort of, without going into specifics, a lot of the red tape that hearX, for example, and I won't go into, as I say, specifics, they may have encountered if they were a new business in America, i.e. they start going and say, we're going to provide audiology solutions, which is very important. I mean, if you cannot hear, you don't want some little business sticking stuff in someone's ear and potentially doing more damage, right? In South Africa, it seems as though they were able to do that, not necessarily that example, but we were able to get the clinical data much faster than our competitors would have been able to do in America. So all of a sudden, in 1, 2, 3 years, we've got hundreds of thousands of data sets that in America, in Europe, wherever, would have taken them 10, 15, 20 years. So we completely leapfrog that data collection and that clinical collection. And we see that very much as our let's say, competitive advantage internationally. I mean, the final thought to that, and health tech in particular, we are seeing now health and health tech, it's the biggest recipient or the largest recipient of investment globally currently. I mean, that obviously makes complete sense. But the interesting thing is there's a shift. There's a shift from nice to haves to must haves. You know, it's not nice to hear. It's a must have. You have to be able to hear, obviously, well, not have to, but you want to give someone the best chance possible, right? Sure. That's an example. With Sheraan, just using the panel, you want people to have access to healthcare consultations. So, you know, how does one go about finding a doctor in the middle of a crisis, not actually being able to go to the doctor because doctors are not necessarily seeing patients and get effective treatment. Without platforms like RecoMed, you simply cannot do that. So we're living in a time where these real world health tech solutions are more topical than ever before. And South Africa and other parts of Africa, we almost have an advantage where our regulator, as I said, is commercially minded and allows us to almost leapfrog some of our nations up north.
Ian, thanks. That leads beautifully to a question that's come from Keza, somebody who's on the call at the moment. And I'd like to open this to the three entrepreneurs. So Keza said, as innovators, what action steps do you feel that government and other entrepreneurs ought to act on in terms of policy, education, and even accessing human resources to ensure that Africa catches up to ongoing technology opportunities around the world? So I don't know if one of you would like to kick off with that response to that question. Geoffrey, go ahead.
Sure. So I can take this one. I think this question hits close to home because we are in a very highly regulated environment. We also like to argue that if the government softened some of these regulations, it could spur more innovation, it could spur more financial inclusion. Yeah, so if you look at across the content, and it's something Ian has also spoken about, regulators have a conservative bias towards a lot of the innovation, and you find that it takes 2, 3, 4 years for you to get properly regulated, allowed to. Yeah, so I think primarily one thing the government could do, something practical that has been tried in some territories around the world, is creating regulatory sandboxes where it allows various innovators to play on the edge of innovation, to play on the edge of regulation, and then perhaps that could even give rise to new regulation that addresses more than what it holds. Yeah, so while I understand regulation is designed to protect consumers, I also think it slows down innovation. So I think that's one thing the government could do.
Thanks, Geoffrey. Seline, I'd like to cut to you because I think you're working across jurisdictions, developing technology here in South Africa, but exporting that to the US. So you're coping with multiple legislative environments. What is your sense about how we grow more tech and innovation in Africa in particular?
So I know that most people have this opinion that as South Africans or Africans, we need to catch up to the rest of the world. I don't really like that way of thinking about it, because I think we have so much going on here and we have developed so much out of necessity that it's not necessarily that we are behind and we need to catch up. So I just want to question that a little bit for my own personal sake. I really believe that South Africans are very resourceful. But that being said, I think the one thing that the Americans do well compared to what we could do, because I think the question was specifically aimed at what can we do better? Like, how can we change this? How can we get somewhere? And what the Americans do that we should learn from is lobbying. So as much as the world has gone towards this space of not really liking facts and not relying on truth, it's more your opinion and you can feel if the sky is green, the sky is green. I do think lobbying local governmental organizations, spending time actually teaching people what is possible, showing it to them, showing them tangible data, showing them case studies and research that has been done to show how this benefits the population and the healthcare system. I do think way too often as business people, we sit back and we constantly working at something, but the opportunities do kind of pop up or pop down as you knock on doors. Some of them open, some of them don't. I think we need to spend more time knocking on doors. And we need to step up to the plate sometimes and fight for change in our industries, because ultimately, if it's to the benefit of our population and our country and our healthcare systems, we should be the ones to lead that charge instead of just waiting back and seeing what happens.
Jonathan, sorry to
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
But Seline raises a very good point. I mean, we often can be quite self-deprecating in many ways as South Africa, where we look over our shoulders and think we're not good enough. I mean, hearX is a very nice example. When we invested in the business, I won't quite say who, because they're quite under the radar type organization, but effectively, one of our co-investors, when coming into the round, they're a subsidiary of MIT, which is one of the foremost technology universities in the world. And they have access to 5,000 of the smartest engineers. And we said to them quite simply, well, we're quite curious as to the fact that you're investing in a South African technology-based business, whether it's audiology, health tech, that's not relevant. With all the smart American, well, not necessarily American, but smart engineers that you have access to, why don't you just develop this technology yourself? And they said quite simply, well, one of their requirements before investing into hearX was they had to go to these 5,000 engineers and say, can you do this? And the engineers came back and they said, yes, we can do it, but it's going to take us 5 years and it's going to cost us, multiples of millions of dollars. And they said it's just so cutting edge, so slick, and the fact that they managed to do it so, I don't want to say quickly because they've been at this for a while, but certainly so efficiently, really is, it exemplifies exactly what Seline is saying we do have areas of expertise. I'm not pretending we're good at everything, but certain things, health tech, safe tech, digital business solutions, fintech, you look at our banks, I mean, a handful of our banks have I think F&B Capitec, they've won most innovative bank in the world. I think it's now 3 times over the last 5 years. That's pretty impressive. And we sort of, brush it off our shoulders and say, well, it's a big world. Citibank, Barclays Bank, HSBC, they're not the most innovative banks in the world. It's our local banks. And we sometimes just need to give ourselves a little bit more credit.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey,
please
John,
go ahead, Sheraan. Yeah.
This has been a perennial thorn in my side, this idea of government regulation. So RecoMed is my second venture capital backed company. My first one I started in 2009. And we sold to a US company in 2013, and that required South African Reserve Bank approval. And one of the biggest concerns in the entire sale of the company process was will they say yes or no? And I've got a nice piece of paper where the Reserve Bank gave me permission to sell the company. It's quite incredible when you think about it.
Yeah.
We recently did a fundraising transaction in RecoMed that involved foreign investors and a convertible loan, and we weren't able to fulfill the terms because we were worried about the Reserve Bank having an issue with the terms of that loan. So I think for me, the principle here is, and as I sit here now, and we know this, but I think it should be said for the benefit of the audience and the stakeholders at GIBS. Yeah, as I sit here, I can leave my house to play a good round of golf, but I'm not allowed to surf. That's the current state of regulation in South Africa and the level of applied. So my constant, and as a healthcare entrepreneur, I think we have to be cognizant of the purpose of regulation safety. There's a lot of quackery out there and people need to be protected from it. So we're not trying to say this to be reckless. That said, I'm a strong advocate that we need to remove the pen out of the government's officials' hands and replace it with a pair of scissors. And they have to start cutting down regulation. There's too much of it. It's absolutely constricting, and we're feeling it. I mean, Geoffrey is sitting in the new, unfortunately, the new de facto tech capital of Africa. In Cape Town, we believe it is by talent and by companies and by venture capital invested. But I can guarantee that more international capital flowed into Kenya in the last year than in South Africa. And that is largely due to our regulatory environment. So we can get into all the details around it. But I think truly we're scoring own goal after own goal there. And finally, it's not government's job to innovate. Companies innovate, people innovate. What they need to do is create the freedom in order to do so. And you can't do that when you're playing protectionism on the one hand and an immense sense of fear and control on the other. And we've never truly shed the shackles of the last 100 years and the political legacy of the country there. So things like capital controls, these arbitrary regulations around telemedicine. I have lobbied, I've been involved in lobbying, and it's been highly ineffective. And I also think it's very, I was also part of the group to advocate. I was on the 4IR panel for the government, and I thought it quite ironic that we're talking about 4IR when we don't have fundamental blocks in place, and perhaps we've got some stumbling blocks and some hurdles that we're setting up. So those are my real concerns. And to be fair, in South Africa, I don't see us making progress as quickly as we should. In telemedicine, it was the commercial need of the healthcare industry going out of business that forced the change, not the debates around 4IR that our president's been talking about for 2 years. That had no impact, zero impact. So I wonder what's going to be the cause. And I think I'd also call on everyone in the audience. I'd call on GIBS, my fellow entrepreneurs, for us to really get to lobbying to create some change here.
Thanks, Sheraan. Geoffrey, are you finding that that Kenya is a more liberal environment in some ways, or supportive for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been a lot of, first of all, we have a very strong lobby community. So you have companies such as Financial Sector Deepening, CGAP, UNCDF. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of organizations lobbying, and I mean, fortunately, this has got some regulators. For example, we have a sandbox by the Markets Authority of Kenya, where they bring in startups playing in the buying and selling of securities, and then so they've created a sandbox, and they have active startups trying to push those regulations further. And I mean it's and then also you have for example. Our government itself also uses technology to disperse government services to the people. In fact, I mean, beyond that, even service, even government bonds are issued through our USSD platform, which every Kenyan has access to. So, I think I see it, very lucky, very lucky relative to the rest of Africa. And I'm sure if the rest of Africa copies, we're going to see a very interesting growth.
Thanks. And just to those listening in and watching, please, if you have any last questions, please post those on either the Q&A or the chat facility on Zoom, so I can ask the panel. I have got one question for all of you from somebody in the audience, wanting to know, is there a sort of slow uptake of new technology in South Africa? The question was raised around M-Pesa, which didn't seem to take off in South Africa, but took off elsewhere. And maybe, Seline, starting with you, I know you have structural constraints to your business in terms of the cost and and access in terms of market size. But you think there's a slower uptake to new technology here than there is, say, in the US, your major market?
So obviously this is highly dependent on the industry in which you operate. But we actually initially saw a ramp up in terms of local use because people knew us and they knew our context in which we're operating. We built tech for people to use in lower income countries. That was our initial business model 5 years ago. And then we saw South African audiologists and medical professionals getting really nervous. And I think that's where having a disruptive technology is interesting, because people want it, but they're also scared. People have literally said to us, they don't want the robots to come and take their jobs. And I think that when it comes to technology, there's a lot of education that you need to do with your clients to help them understand that this is something that will benefit them. So the uptake in terms of our technologies is now a lot higher in the US. And I think it has been because of necessity. And with regards to their easing legislation for hearing aids and the dispensing of hearing aids, we've seen a change in mindset of our customers from, on the consumer side, from the concept of, I appreciate my doctor and I'll see my doctor whenever my doctor will see me, to actually, I'll decide when you can see me. I'll decide what data of mine you get to see. I'll decide how my hearing loss looks and how I want to treat it. And all we've done is put the tools in people's hands to put them back in control of their own health. So yes, definitely a difference in uptake, but we plan on optimizing our business model overseas and then bringing it home once we're able to.
Oh, fantastic. We look forward to seeing that. Thanks, Seline. And Sheraan, with you, you've worked with a lot of doctors who, my understanding is that traditionally are quite slow to adopt technology. Just briefly, what is your experience of getting them to adopt this new technology?
I think that in terms of how we measure technological adoption, we should split it into two categories, and that's doctors and everybody else. And unfortunately, doctors are slow. But that said, there is a curve, and once it's in, it's in. So having worked in other global markets, I find that yes, and on average, the business owner, the professional, perhaps such as the doctor, there's three classes of adopters. There's the consumer, the professional, and then perhaps the business, the enterprise, and lastly governments. I would say that yes, the professional is a little slower in South Africa, potentially due to the slightly more hierarchical structure of our society. So they have a little bit more authority than they do in other territories. As a result, there's less impetus to change. Again, COVID's had a big impact there. Once you've acquired the customer, however, or once the customer has been referred from someone they trust, usually a fellow professional, you're in. I mean, if it works, and you're in. So that has been somewhat of a challenge, but you know, where there's challenges, there's opportunities. It's good to be the first one to go and capture all that market share, entrench yourself, and then it's almost impossible for you. Just the thing with difficult acquisition also means that once you've acquired the customer, they're incredibly difficult to dislodge. So speedy acquisition in a very fluid market like the US means perhaps annually they're going to be reviewing a group of competitors and looking to switch products. In South Africa, they might be with you for the next 10 years. And that's commonly the case. Find at the enterprise, the speed of decision-making is generally slower due to the fact that we've got a couple of dominant, we've got 3 or 4 companies with 90% market share in many of our sectors. So that slows down things a little bit. Although the actual systems that they use is world-class for sure. And then the consumer, I see no differences in speed of adoption. It's a funny thing. Consumers are consumers. You know, if you give them better tools and services, they just tend to use it and gobble it up. I'm sure Geoffrey and Seline have found the same in there. So we have actually the consumers is rarely the barrier. The real concern is that there is a size to the consumer market here. So then you look to expand elsewhere into other emerging markets or wherever your platform may take you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Sheraan. And thank you to the 4 panelists, to Ian for bringing 3 of your investee companies on board, Seline, Geoffrey, Sheraan. This has been a fascinating conversation. I think you've given us a lot to think about, not just in terms of the structural constraints to innovation and entrepreneurship, but also the great opportunities that emerge, particularly through this crisis of COVID-19. But also, as Ian has said, for us to be proud of the technology that's coming out of the African continent and to sell that with great pride into international markets. So I wish the three of you as entrepreneurs everything of the best into the future with your businesses. We look forward as GIBS to keeping in touch with you. And Ian, as always, it's lovely to chat with you and to hear what you're doing with HAVAIC. Thank you to all of those of you who attended this Flash Forum, and thank you for the questions. We look forward to seeing you on future Flash Forums. Please keep an eye on the GIBS website, as well as other courses, workshops, and conferences that we're offering online. So the best to all of you, a wonderful weekend, and stay safe. And thank you so much for your participation in this Flash Forum.
Thank you very much. Come in here. Just finished, Martin.